Okay, it is about 8:31 p.m. and today is Tuesday, February the 18th, and this is week 2 of Introduction to Criminal Law, 5.5 weeks. Trust me, the weeks go by very, very, very fast. Before you know it, we will be in boy, look at this class here. I got 5 students turning out. I'm happy. I love that. I don't get 5 students all quarter long, so that's a good sign. So anyway, let's go ahead and let's get started. I'm going to share my screen so we can talk about some things. First thing I want to talk about is last week's written assignments. I am in the process of grading them now, but I noticed that some students didn't get the message that it involved. Just quickly, I'll throw it up there before I go into, here we go. Oh, you know what? That's the wrong class. That's 115. That's the 5.5 week. Let's get to the right class first. Okay, now we're there. So, so last week's assignment, there we go, dealing with the elements of criminal law. Some people didn't get it, that each scenario should have been about 1 page long for a total of 3 pages. And that didn't count the reference page. And there should have been citations included for each of these various scenarios. And then, so make sure you use this guide throughout this course to help you with your assignments. I've clicked on that before, and if you click on it, it actually tells you, what to watch out for and all the requirements for discussion posts and everything that you need to know. And this is particularly designed for this course to help you to navigate this course. All right. So anyway, I just wanted to point that out. Make sure that you pay close attention to my rubrics. Rubrics are very important because this told the same thing. And if you notice, you got 10 points for scenario 1, 10 for 3, 2 and 3. So that's why I said they're equally balanced. And then you got your 5 points for meeting the minimum 3-page minimum requirement, and then APA citations in the body, and then of course references at the end. Not just one set of references. You didn't have to have a set of references for each section, just citations in the body there. So that's just a quick review of what we had last week. So now let's go back to the course homepage. And you see these various resources here. Notice rubrics are in each written assignment. And this is a reminder that the lectures 2, which is where we are now, 3, 4, 5, and 6 will take place every Tuesday, beginning today, and 8:30 to roughly 9:30 p.m. And then, I'll give a key phrase. And then here are the recordings go under here. Week 2 will be under here after we finish tonight, and then the YouTube links as well. So now let's take a look at the announcement for the week. Let's open it up. So we're going to deal with crimes against property tonight. And you were to read chapters 3, 4, and 12 of the textbook, A Brief Introduction to Criminal Law. I did send you each the corresponding PowerPoints that you should have for studying. I don't use the PowerPoints in the lectures. I use what's in the module to help you out in terms of completing your assignments. And so we're going to talk about what are crimes against property. What are they? Larceny, robbery, or burglary, misappropriation, trespassing, and vandalism. And then we're going to deal with some little things that they put in here to help you to navigate the module in itself. And take that out. And for practice, crimes against property. And then please, whatever you do, take these practice quizzes, because as you will know, there will be 2 quizzes in this course. One in week 3, which will cover weeks 1 through 3. And then the second one will be week 6, and that will cover modules 4 through 6, 4, 5, and 6. All right, so now then you have the discussion assignment: robbery, burglary, and theft. And we're going to talk about that a little bit tonight. And then complete the written assignment, identity theft problem. We're going to go over the requirements for that in just a minute. And then you know about my motto: adversity is the springboard to success, especially those of you who've had me in other classes. I always, every open house, let my students know who I am. I'm very transparent about who I am and about why I relate to challenges that my students have, because of the challenges that I had even as a student and as a child coming up, and what led me to become a lawyer, and why I'm committed to producing ethical, professional, and educated criminal justice individuals who can operate well in the system, because the system let me down, but it helped me at the same time to become who I am today. So, all right, so let's look at the course calendar. Here it is. As you can see, this is where we are today. And again, clicking on it, it gives details that I just gave you a few minutes ago. It's not just a little bit there. And then your initial post tells you about the topics that that we are working on for the discussion post this week. That is robbery, burglary, and theft. And then you see that the initial post is due tonight, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard, and that your reply post is due tonight, by Saturday, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. And then your written assignment is due this Sunday, the 23rd, as well as your key phrase. Okay. All right. So that's, and be aware, again, as I show you, that this is week 1. We're in week 2, week 3. We will finish week 3. That all assignments are due on the 1st. On any assignments from week 1, 2, and 3 that are not turned in by the 1st, the end of the 1st, will not be accepted unless I've made previous arrangements with you. So very, very, very important that you keep up, because we will be in the second half of the course. And then you'll see how quickly, at the 1st, here's that 1st, that we'll have 2 more weeks after that. And then the final class lecture will be the 17th, and then 3 days later, the course ends. And you see there are written assignments here, and one of the written assignments is the quiz. That was what I was telling you about. Okay. You also saw one earlier if you looked at the course calendar. This is for week 3's quiz, and that's the midterm, I always call it. Okay, so that'll cover weeks 1, 2, and 3. I think I covered that during open house, but I just like to repeat it to remind you guys. So let's take a look at what's in our module for tonight, crimes against property. let's start out by looking at the assignments so you can be right about what those are. Your discussion post, you're going to deal with the issue of whether or not Debbie is guilty of robbery, burglary, and theft. I've kind of given some clues about that in my discussion post that I have submitted, a discussion post that I submitted already, but I'm going to talk about it tonight also as well. So those of you who still have time to submit your discussion post tonight will be able to see this information. So your initial post will be whether Debbie is guilty of these 3 crimes or any of these 3 crimes, and explain the difference and the likelihood of Debbie being convicted of all 3. That's your initial post. And then in your reply post, look at someone else who may have said something different as well. And remember the guides I told you that are there to help you as well. All right. So now let's look at the written assignment. So the written assignment, identity theft. Now notice that there's 2 parts to this. There's the first part, which consists of a written assignment based on this scenario here. It is a minimum of 2 pages, not counting the reference page, double space, guys. APA, which means citations in the body, references at the end, properly formatted cover sheet, and Roman 12 should be the font that you utilize as well. And your margins should be appropriate as well. And so you're going to deal with each of these 5 points. And you're going to deal pretty much with points 1 to 4. But then 5 tells you make sure that you include APA citations. And I'm going to say this to you up front. I would encourage you not to rely on your textbook a whole lot. I want to get you into the habit of researching. So if you use your textbook as a sole source, if you look at your course home page, you'll see that you'll lose 2 points right off the bat. So we want to make sure that you do what you're supposed to do in terms of research. All right. So you're going to deal with each of these 4 points. Then you're going to create a flyer. Now I'm going to run all of these things through Grammarly. Make sure that your flyer is not copied and pasted. Make sure that you are using reliable, credible sources. Do not use Course Hero to complete your papers. I've had some students to use Course Hero. It is a paper mill, and people go there and they find information that they use in their papers, and when I run them through Grammarly, you get a hit, big hit, and then I report it to the school as well. So you don't want to be in that crowd known as Course Hero. There's a couple others, but Course Hero is kind of the big one. And then as far as a reference that people use that is a no-no, Wikipedia is that, and you'll see that in your, take time to read what is in each section of the rubric and make sure that you have not gotten caught in any traps in those. So anyway, the template, there's a template to help you to complete, and so gather the information, conduct some research concerning this. And it says don't copy and paste directly from the internet. I said that when completing this test. This should be an original flyer, and cite your sources. Cite your sources. Did you hear me? Cite your sources. You will lose points for that as well. And be sure to use the appropriate tone and language for your audience. Once again, we have these guides that help you. Now you can submit these assignments by compressing the folder or either zip. I don't care which one, whichever one is easiest for you, but I like the one where you'll put a file and then attach a second file to the assignment together. Don't do two submissions. Some students do two submissions, a first submission, second submission. Don't do that. Get them all in one submission. And then, so make sure you do that. You don't have to have a cover sheet for the flyer, because it should be also a part of the second year. Cover sheet appropriately will be for the written assignment aspect of it. Now, let's take a look at what the rubric says, which is due Sunday. And it tells you, same thing that you just saw a few minutes ago. Okay? And read that through carefully. Then make sure you satisfy all the issues here. A minimum of 2 pages length. Double space. Remember, not 1.5, not 1 3/4, but 2 pages. I don't care if you go over, but just don't go under, because you will lose points. You'll lose 3 points right off the bat. APA, you will lose 5 points if you don't have both citations and references. If you have one or the other, you're still going to lose 5 points. And then make sure that you use credible sources. See, Wikipedia is one that we don't like. And then this tells you your flyer should be 1 page minimum. So you want to use the template to create the flyer and provide the information, okay? I take time to read them all, and I run all these, and if you submit your flyer in a PowerPoint, it's not going to work. It's got to be a Word document. Everything's got to be a Word document. If you see down here at the bottom, it says somewhere in here it says Word. Doesn't say it here, but it needs to be a Word document. Usually it does say in here. You can create your flyer using Microsoft Word. There we go. Or Publisher. But make sure that, you know, this template will help you a whole lot, so you can add material. And I can run it through Grammarly. If it's a PDF, I can't do it. You're going to have to make sure that it is a Word document. Okay. Going back. Any questions about the written assignment for this week? Type in the chat box if you have a question. Yes or no. And if you don't say anything, I'll take it that you have no questions. Okay. I don't see any. So I take it everybody's straight on what the assignments are. All right. At any point, you think of something, type it in the chat box. So now let's get into the lesson content. We got about 40 minutes more left that we can use. So we're going to deal with crimes against property. Again, reminding you what the assignments are. So we're going to deal with each of these sections right here in terms of lecture. So let's start about what are crimes against property. Well, just to overall be aware of the fact that crime against property is every crime that's not crime against a person. That's the best way that I can tell you. And we'll talk about crimes against persons next week. You should also be aware that you're going to discover that crimes against property are not as severe in terms of sentencing, because usually it's believed that with property you have insurance, and restitution can be made and things of that nature. But we spend a lot of time dealing with crimes against property. It says, although crimes against people are more violent, police, we spend a lot of time reporting on investigating property crimes, especially in the age that we're in now, with the internet, dealing with identity theft. We will talk about those things. Dealing with situations where people are stealing items. I'll tell you this, crimes against property, particularly theft, burglary, and robbery, you will find are crimes that occur a lot of times because of this other course that I teach, drugs and crime. As I always remind all of my students, there is a strong correlation between drugs and crime. People commit crimes in order to support their habits. And this is where we get into the crimes against property. And so basically, individuals are not intended to suffer any physical harm. So most property crime offenses don't involve physical harm as stated, except some robberies, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But usually, you know, people lose their personal effects, they lose their property, they feel like for example, here in my home, if someone breaks into my home, I feel violated, as it says here. And even though I have insurance, there are also items of value that insurance really can't cover. But insurance covers a lot of the loss. But sometimes you find yourselves stuck with losing because of the all-powerful deductibles that you pay insurance companies. And you should be aware that property crimes such as maybe retail theft and all kinds of other property crimes where insurance is involved, or either where, for example, people steal from the stores, they commit theft, it affects us as consumers because we end up picking up the slack and paying more for the items that we get. So let's specifically break it down here. Let's see, let me get to that question in the chat box. More. Let's see, I saw something about when you say cite tech sources for the flyer. Yeah, APA style for the flyer as well. But I mean, because you use in-text citations on the flyer and then use references at the end. Yeah, make sure that you make sure you make your comments public to everyone, which I see you did in one. Yeah. Nope, you want to have in-text citations for the flyer as well, okay? So anyway, let's talk about these various crimes. And we're going to talk about these that are bulleted: larceny, burglary and robbery, misappropriation, trespassing, and vandalism, okay? So larceny. What's another word for larceny that we use? Anybody know? Type it in. What's another word we use? Exactly. Thank you, Chris. It's theft. And it says at common law, larceny was used and unlawful taking of personal property with intent to permanently deprive that individual of that property. And today it is called theft. And you should be aware that in many jurisdictions, it depends on the value of that property, whether it's a felony or a misdemeanor. Such as it says here in the state of Florida, if someone steals something valued at $299.99 or less, they could be convicted of a misdemeanor. However, if it's $300 or more, then they would be considered as grand theft. And pretty much almost all jurisdictions follow that same mode. That, and I'm not saying that that's the same dollar amount, but there is an amount that is used. The higher the amount, the more likely you deal with a felony because of the cost and value of the property. Petty offenses are based upon what is in the statutes in themselves. And like I said, there's identity theft, there's retail theft, there's auto theft, and theft of telecommunications. With those kinds of things, what that is, you know what theft of telecommunications is? Anybody know? Anybody know theft? Give me an example of what theft of communications is. Theft of telecommunications. Goes with the video and the satellite and cable. Anyway, it's when people steal the signal and the services. Now, I'm not talking about some of these things that you can buy in the store legally and use not the fire sticks and things like that, because you should be aware that what has happened is that the reason why cable and some of these services like AT&T, Xfinity, which I have, and others around the country that you may have, Spectrum and whatever you have in your community that's higher in the cost, is because of the fact that now they're competing against these companies. Like, for example, you can pay for services. I have what they call a Roku TV, and my TV, I can get a lot of channels. However, though, I'm paying to use it. But I also have in my home Xfinity as well. So the bottom line is that some people get these services for nothing and don't pay for anything, and that's when we get into the theft of video and satellite. Now, we're not talking about like bootleg tapes and things like that. That also fits within the concept of property crime as well. But you should be aware of the fact that they are very costly, and the ones who are the providers for it, when someone else is using it and they're not paying fair value for it, you could be aware that some of these services that you get that get the signals from others, they do pay a price for it, and then they in kind will charge you maybe even a lower amount, but they do pay an amount. So, and then probably one of the biggest crimes that take place in the United States involves stealing automobiles, and automobiles are taken all the time. I remember when I was a police officer, one of the things that we used to find are cars that would disappear. Do you know what happens with a lot of cars that are stolen is that they end up in what we call chop shops, where the parts are, and they talk about that here, where they take them and sell them and use them for the parts. And then some of the higher end stolen vehicles are even sold overseas, for example. So that's cars like you got your Mercedes, you got your Lexus, you got any high-end car that you find in that situation. Okay. So now let's talk about what happens here as far as people taking property. Again, the intent to take the property is to get away, but then sometimes there's violence that may come about from like the police chases or either from somebody possibly shooting someone and those kinds of things. Um, they talk about here something which is very interesting to me. Some vehicles may be stolen from a driveway where the keys were left in it or being warmed up on a cold day. I have a lot of friends, I don't have one, who have a starter. They can start their car remotely. However, the cars are still locked. I got news for you, good people. There are people that I'm aware of that when I was an attorney who could take those systems and now they can show you how they can get those cars and take them and drive them. Now, what you can do is a lot of people also have included in those is a way to turn it off and stop it. So that's one of the features. That's a mechanism to protect it. So there's a whole lot of things that we're going to talk about tonight in terms of dealing with larceny. So now let's start talking about larceny, also called theft. So let's deal with vehicle theft first. As you know, this is something that is done quite easy now. There are theft of cars, buses, scooters, motorcycles, boats, and snowmobiles. And so the auto theft laws operate on the federal as well as on the state level, such as the example here in Colorado that has auto theft laws, where in some states include auto theft within the general theft statutes. Like Minnesota has a paragraph outlawing auto theft, which forbids taking or driving a motor vehicle without the consent of the owner. So basically, we're not even talking about carjacking and stuff like that. We're going to talk about that later. But look at the general definition of vehicle theft. Basically, it goes with theft. Intentionally operating or driving without the consent of the vehicle of another. And what it means is that the person didn't have permission to take that. I am aware that there are some kids who have done that with their parents. They've taken the car without their permission. The key is they knew what they were doing. They didn't get the consent of the owner, and that's the key thing. So taking it without the owner's permission, that's the way you get into vehicle theft in itself. So that's what you concentrate on. Like Wisconsin requires that an offender manipulate the controls in some fashion, such as starting the engine, those kinds of things. I don't think you can move a car unless you start the engine. I mean, I don't mean that you can't put it in neutral and roll it, but you know what I'm talking about. In most cases, that's the case. The engine has to be started. And so the key thing is that that's how auto theft occurs. Now you see this little thing, you know, they're using a screwdriver and stuff like that. There are many systems now that have changed the door locks so that it's not as easy to do that. But trust me, there are auto thefts that take place, and individuals who get devices that they can get into your car in less than a minute. Less than a minute. But you do make it easier when you leave your car running. I see people go into the gas station and they will maybe even leave their car, even to pump gas. When I get out of my car to pump my gas, I always take my keys out. Even if my wife is sitting in the passenger side or my kids, because someone can jump in a matter of seconds, and they're gone at that particular point. So be very careful about that kind of thing. I will lock my car if I go into the gas station itself, because you can pay at the pump. But if I go inside for anything, whether it's used the washroom or to do anything, I'm not going to leave it running. I don't care how cold it is. I'm not going to leave it with the keys in there. And then, of course, even the point that you have extra keys. There's some people that they have extra keys, so they'll lock it and leave it running, breaking that glass, and they're gone. Trust me, I've seen it. I've seen it as a law enforcement officer very quickly take place. All right. So anyway, that's vehicle theft. Okay. Now let's talk about what is joyriding with it. And basically, joyriding is taking the vehicle, not necessarily to permanently deprive the individual, but to take it on what we call a ride. The crime of joyriding occurs when a person takes a vehicle of another without the consent. See, the same thing as theft, but they don't want to permanently deprive the owner of the vehicle. That's when the kind of riding crime that's generally charged if your kids take your car or somebody like that. And usually what happens is that if the vehicle is returned, this is within 48 hours, the offense is a misdemeanor, not a felony. The longer you keep the vehicle, the longer you could end up with a vehicle, depriving the vehicle. Did you not know that if you rent a car, and it's written in most contracts, that if you go over the period of time and that kind of thing, then you get to the point of possibly vehicle theft, or maybe even joyriding, depending on all the circumstances. The fact of the matter is you could be charged with a civil as possibly a criminal act. Most courts would probably want to turn it into a criminal act. I mean, a civil act. But if it's clear that you took the vehicle and kept it for long periods of time and you didn't return it, then you might find yourself in one of those. Okay, let's talk about the last one involving cars, and this is the commonly referred event as carjacking, where a car is taken with a threat. It's part to robbery because usually it's done with a weapon. So carjacking, some people consider carjacking if you leave your keys in the car and you're pumping gas and someone drives off with it, then they consider it carjacking. No, that's vehicle theft. But carjacking is similar, but the key thing is that you forcibly taken the vehicle of another, commonly, as shown here in this picture, with a weapon, where a weapon is brandished and the individual is forced to give up the car. Illinois, my state here, has vehicle hijacking, which prohibits a person from knowingly taking a vehicle from the person or the immediate presence of another by the threat of force or the use of force. Now we're starting to talk about robbery, which we will be talking about in just a few minutes. But that's an element. So carjacking is vehicle theft with the same elements that you'll discover when you deal with robbery. Okay. And both carjacking and robbery are felonies in all states. And the reason being is because, I'm going to ask you, what do you think the reason is that it's a felony in most states, carjacking as well as robbery? Anybody? Anybody want to take a guess? Well, Yeah, okay, that's you're on the right path. But why is it a felony? You're right though about that part, but there's a little bit more. Uh, yes and no. The key thing is, because we got more to cover, I'll keep you figuring it out. Robbery is forcefully using force. Mm-hmm. That's exactly why. Because they are both violent offenses, and you start to move from property into what we're going to talk about next week. But the answer is yes, because you're endangering lives or possibly getting someone hurt. That's the exact answer right there. Okay, and that's why they're considered as felonies. So now let's talk about a topic that's really on point for an assignment that you're doing this week. Um, Burglary and robbery. Uh, they are not the same. It used to be under common law that burglary was entering the dwelling of another with intent to commit a crime in the nighttime. It used to be a requirement of nighttime. I remember us talking about this in law school. And the reason for that is because that's the time when you're most vulnerable, because you're probably sleeping or relaxing and in your home. So it was defined as the breaking and entering a dwelling with the intent to uh, commit another crime, such as vandalism or maybe theft. At common law, as I said, it was limited to the home and nighttime, but now it's vehicles, it's your cars, your vessels, any time of the day. Now, here is the thing that you need to know about burglary. Burglary, as it says, involves the entering the dwelling of another with intent to steal or commit a crime, such as theft. You do not, people, have to physically go in to commit burglary. And I'm just telling you, you can as simply have an open window and reach inside that window, because what you did was you broke the plane of the public area to the private area. Then you've committed burglary. Even if you did it with a stick or something like a pen and you reached in, are you committing theft? No, you're committing burglary. And that is something that you need to be aware of. Okay? So a lot of people get tricked. They think, oh, you got to climb in the window. You do not have to climb in the window. You can just simply reach in the window. And that's burglary all by itself, because you have entered into the premises. Because and if you broke the window and reached in, then that's property damage and burglary. But if you just have a window open and my cell phone is sitting right there, or my computer or my tablet or something valuable, and you take it, that's burglary. Okay? So now you know. Let's talk about what robbery is. So robbery, like larceny or theft, unlawful taking of personal property of another with the intent to permanently deprive. So far it sounds like simple theft. However, there is another element and aspect that we've talked about already when we dealt with carjacking. Must be from a person, an individual, and, not or, and must be done by the use of force, intimidation, threat, or violence. That element must be there. So the question is, if I'm across the hall, down the street, and I start to come and I see you taking something, and I might be intimidated or something like that, but you're at a distance, you can't use robbery. You can't use robbery. It has to be from the person and using force. Force can be used with a toy gun or even with a pencil. If someone thinks it's something that puts them in fear or threat of being hurt, that is what we call robbery. But you gotta have those elements. Remember that. Remember that for your test. So robbery is broken down into what we call armed robbery, strong arm robbery, or home invasion robbery. So let's talk about those different ones. So what is armed robbery? Armed robbery is when a weapon is used. That's the exact thing. Now, the weapon doesn't have to be seen by the person. For example, as I was saying earlier about a pen and concealed, and a person go into a bank and they have in their pocket pointing something out that might not be a gun, and tell you to give them, the money, your wallet, or whatever. This is armed robbery because it is not for the person to determine whether or not that is something that can help, just hurt them. Just like a toy gun. I had a person when I was a police officer who tried to rob me, and he had a toy gun. And fortunately for him, he didn't die, because I could have killed him, because it wasn't for me to determine whether or not it was. But it placed me in fear, even though I technically wasn't, because I knew how to respond as a law enforcement officer. But the average individual could be robbed in a situation like that, and could be in fear of injury. Now let's look at strong arm robbery. Strong arm robbery is like you see here, is similar to robbery, except no weapon has to be used. So snatching a purse snatching, that's strong arm robbery. So look at what it says. A 25-year-old woman is jogging on a trail. She has a wrist purse in her right hand, which contains her identification and cash. And the kid runs up behind her and rips the wristlet away and runs off. That's strong arm robbery, all right? Because no weapon was displayed, but force was used to take the item. The crime becomes strong arm robbery. So remember, you don't have to have a weapon to deal in strong arm robbery, okay? Next time you think about strong arm robbery, think of someone snatching, purse snatching, or something like that. That's where you're going to run across it. And then the last one, home invasion. Now, let me explain something to you about home invasion. It's robbery because it's akin to burglary, but it's more serious because the intent in home invasion is to possibly hurt or threaten someone. It's similar to burglary. During home invasion robbery, an offender enters the dwelling of another without the consent, but uses force to commit a robbery of the occupants. Burglary, see, burglars are different from robbers. Burglars don't want to come across people, but home invaders don't care. And when they come across people, if they have a weapon, for example, then look at what it says, Florida. It says the elements of home invasion: intentionally entering the dwelling of another without consent. That sounds like burglary. But then commits robbery of the occupants. And we already talked about what robbery, the elements of robbery are, okay? Taking by force, or threat, or intimidation, or violence. from another. Okay? So you got those three. All right? So now let's talk about misappropriation. Misappropriation is basically what it says in the words. Mis means improper appropriate. Appropriation means taking. And so it doesn't mean that you have to carry the property away, but what you're doing is you're depriving the individual of property that they've earned, and you take it unlawfully. Embezzlement, fraud, forgery, welfare fraud, identity theft, and crimes. So let's talk about them quickly, one by one. Embezzlement is when you're entrusted with some funds or money or something of value, and you take it for yourself. That's basically it. People working in banks, people working in stores, people working on their jobs, and those kinds of things. Okay. Fraud. Fraud is very simply taking the property in various forms, and what they consist of obtaining a profit through deceit, deception, or trickery. That's pretty much it. Such as welfare fraud involves lying about your income status and saying that you have a need when in reality you have the resources to take care of yourself but not use public funds. So fraud, forgery is, for example, taking an item and changing it. If you give me, I'll give you a check for $10, and then you add an extra zero behind it and go to the bank and is able to cash it, which kind of hard because the checks should be written in words as well as numbers. But the point of the matter is, any attempt to change what the intent of the party is committing forgery. Signing somebody's name to a check or something along their lines without their permission. My wife, for example, will sign my name, I'll sign her name to deposit money in our account if it's in her name. Or either we get our tax refunds and it's jointly, then I will sign my name and her name and put it in our accounts. The point of the matter is that that's different. But what happens is that the idea of forgery is taking something that doesn't, let's say, for example, I took a check from somebody else and then went to the bank to cash it. And then we're talking about and passing myself off that person, then in that case, that's forgery. Look at what Kansas, in the case of opioid addict who has stolen a prescription and forges the doctor's signature, that's, you indicating that the doctor actually signed it. And those are ways that forgery take place. By and far, the biggest one is identity theft. And identity theft is on the rise, people, because of the internet, and it's made it much easier. I today got in the mail 2 or 3 opportunities to apply for loans from various companies. And that information can be taken by someone, and they can fill it out, change the address in there, and then they can apply for the loan, and sometimes end up getting it. I also have seen situations where driver's license, the pictures have been changed on the driver's license to someone else, but the information on the driver's license so that that person can use that driver's license or state ID card to cash a check or pass themselves off as someone else. All of us, with our debit and credit cards, with our PIN numbers, with our credit cards, utilize where people have taken that information. I was, for example, last year, I think it was, uh, applying for a cell phone for my daughter from AT&T, and I had already at that time AT&T for my UVerse as well as my home phone. But when I applied for the cell phone, they said that I had a cell phone. Well, I happen to have Verizon. So I said, no, I don't have a cell phone. They asked me about the address where this took place. It turned out to be a house that I had sold in 2011, people. In 2011. This event happened in 2019. And so what had happened is that they ended up delivering the phone, and then the person, of course, never paid for it. But guess whose name was on it? And it probably was one of those things, old mail things that was sent out trying to get me to get a cell phone. And it went to my address where I used to live, and somebody got it, and they took it, and they went online and ordered it, and they ended up getting it. Well, it took me 4 months to get that straight. 4 months, people, to get that straight. And then I was able to get, after thorough investigation, they came back and realized it wasn't me. But identity theft is, as it says here, such a significant problem that police officers are considered mandatory reporters in this regard. For example, in the state of Wisconsin, requires that when individuals report to a law enforcement agency within their jurisdiction, they become the victims of identity theft, the agency prepare a report of the violation. And so it's a number of reasons why you do that. That's for insurance purposes as well as to protect the individual. I have been a victim where my debit card was used where I paid for food at a restaurant, and you gave, the waiter your card, and the waiter brought it back. Well, it turned out that this happened on a weekend. What that waiter did was not only did they take my card and apply it for the purchase, but they also took it and had a little pocket scanner, which they put into a computer and sent my information to Ohio. And they made a card and made purchases that were about $3,000. And it happened over a weekend. So I went to get some gas on Monday, and they told me that my card clashed with something that was happening in Ohio about the same time at a Panera Bread, and they didn't allow it. So the next day, I went to the bank, and the bank, and banker sat down and asked me, was I in Ohio over the weekend? I said I was not. And what had happened was very simply that my identity, and I had my cards in my possession. I had my debit card in my possession, but just that one time giving it to that waiter. So it makes me feel like now, you're going to these restaurants now and you're starting to have where you can pay at the table. That's something that more and more chains. I think Applebee's does it. I think, let's see, who else does it? Red Lobster does it, and several others. But I'm beginning, to find that that's That's something. My wife went to get her nails done at a place, and she used her card. And then a few days later, it was determined that the card was used somewhere up on the north side of Chicago, and they did some research, and they found out that it was one of the employees of the nail shop who had done it. I remember one time I left my card accidentally in a restaurant, and you know how you get those, you put your card in, and they give it back to you. Well, I forgot to take it out. Well, the person who was our waiter turned out to be the person who took that card and went to Redbox or a video, got some gas, and it turned out to be right in the vicinity of where the person who was the waiter, when I told them who the waiter was, and they checked the locations of it, and then the final thing was they had a video of the person renting the video, but they used my card. So I'm just telling you, it's on the rise. One of the final things I'm going to tell you, and we're a little over time, but I got to tell you this. I had a situation this past year where it appeared that I got an email from one of my colleagues at the college at Rasmussen. And I didn't know this person, but I knew her name. So anyway, the email was allegedly from her that provided me with an opportunity to be a secret shopper. And so anyway, I said, okay, let me check this out. And, I knew she was credible and that it was her email address and everything. So I said, let me check it out. So I checked it out. It turned out that what really was going on was that someone had tapped into her email and they were using it, and they sent me some what appeared to be checks for $18.50 each. 2 checks for $18.50, and they wanted me to take those and buy some Walmart cards, give them the number off the Walmart cards, and then keep $250 for myself. Well, I already knew that something wasn't right about that, so I immediately contacted the postal inspectors. I also contacted the local police, and then I did a little more research, and the Federal Trade Commission provided some information. So it was obviously a scam, so I sent the information. But you have to watch out, people. You guys ever get these emails that tell you, I got one today that said that your account is in jeopardy of how did I put it? Exposure to theft. The problem was that I didn't have an account at this bank. So if you clicked on the information, then what you did was you opened up where a Trojan or something could get into your computer and steal your information. So we have all kinds of things. There are some really good articles that you want to take a look at here. And then dealing with credit card fraud, we've kind of already talked about that. Protecting your PIN and things of that nature. Personal identification number. So the last thing I want to talk about is trespassing. Trespassing basically means entering a property where a person says you're not welcome, and it occurs on land and other structures, homes, vehicles, aircraft, but you usually see it on some situation like this. And that person, you have to stay away. If you go on that land without being invited, then in that case, you're committing trespassing. A property crime similar to burglary, but it doesn't include the elements of theft. Trespassing can occur in a number of vehicles, the way I said, a number of ways here. Vandalism. where you basically are just damaging somebody else's property. That's it. That's it. You're damaging someone else's property, and the elements include intentional, without the consent. Yeah, like I'm gonna tell somebody to damage my property, okay, of another person. So without their consent. All right, and that's it. That's it for property damages. Now, I want to take a few minutes before I give you what I want to share with you. I want to remind you to take advantage of these items here. So I'm going to do a few of them, and I'm going to have you do them with me, and then we're going to adjourn. Let me try it again because it didn't. Let's come back to it. Here we go. So this one, we're going to use flashcards. So I allow it. It's going to open up flashcards. Okay, now, so I'm going to let you provide me with answers based upon what we talked about tonight and what you're reading. The unlawful obtaining of state or government welfare benefits by intentionally providing false information about financial status in order to collect monetary benefits. What is that? Let's see if it's right. Correct. The unlawful entry into the dwelling of another without consent with the intent to commit a robbery. What is that? Any guesses? Everybody falls for that one. Nope, it's home invasion. Remember what the elements are. It says unlawful entry of the dwelling of another without consent. The last part, with the intent to commit a robbery. Okay? The unlawful entry of the dwelling of another without consent with the intent to deprive the person of property, but not to commit a robbery, is then committed as burglary. Okay? That's what a lot of students get caught with that. Watch it when you take your test. The intentional altering, making, or authentication of the writing of another with the intent to defraud or harm another person. What is that crime called? Good job. That's it for that. So you go through those, and you do those. And you begin to see what you're doing is you're preparing also for the exam. All right. So let's do the next ones. We're going to do a few more, and then we'll adjourn here. Practice which crime against property? Okay, which crime against property is this? So, start the activity. A 17-year-old walking home from high school and approached by two suspects. The suspects shove him on the ground and take his wallet. What type of crime is this? Is it A, B, C, or D? Anybody else want to take a shot? Okay, everybody kind of like got that one, so very good. That's correct. A 14-year-old girl left her bicycle, this is a tricky one, on the front lawn. In the morning, the bicycle is missing, and the family reports the crime to the police. What type of crime is this? Okay. Okay. All you guys say theft. Why don't y'all say burglary? says on the front lawn. Okay, I can't get you to say that. But you are right, it is theft. Some people get tricked by that when they see anything about the front lawn. So very good. Don't go for that. The last one I'm going to do for you on this one. A 25-year-old man is attending a party inside his friend's house. While inside the house, the man breaks into a locked bedroom and steals jewelry. The crime is discovered the next day, and the victim reports to the police. What type of crime is this? Is it A, B, C, or D? Everybody say D? It's not theft? Somebody said A. Okay, wrong. It's burglary. Burglary because the man didn't have the permission to be inside the locked bedroom. That's why. Otherwise, it could be theft. Do one more. A clerk working at a local gas station is approached by a masked man who points a gun at him and says, "Give me all the money in the till." The clerk complies. The man flees. The clerk calls police to report the crime. What type of crime is this? A, B, C, or D? Survey says correct. So you see what and these are kind of fun. But remember, this is what you're going to see when you take your exam, people, in week 3. Remember, this is week 1. Each week has, week 2 rather. Each of these weeks have something like this. You had something like this last week too, as well. Then the last thing, and this is the practice quiz itself. By the way, I'm not going to tell you. Some of the questions that are in the practice quiz are in the actual quiz, but they're changed a little bit. That's all I'm going to tell you. The unlawful entry into the dwelling of another without consent with the intent to commit a robbery is known as what? Okay. Yeah, okay. All you guys got that. All right, okay. You're right. What crime is committed when someone points a weapon at another person while on a sidewalk and demands that person to turn over personal property such as a wallet? Okay. Whoops. I don't know what happened. But the answer is yes. That was correct. That was correct. I don't know what happened, but that was correct. Okay. Oh, I know what happened. I double clicked. An 18-year-old high school dropout enters the home of a former student while everybody is asleep and steals a video system. What crime has he committed? Okay. Yep. And so this is how it works. All right. Last one. A 9-year-old boy is playing catch with another friend. They are using a standard baseball. During their game, the boy loses grip of the ball and unintentionally throws it through a window. What offense has been committed? Okay. All right. It is A because it was unintentional. If it was not that word unintentional, then we might have B. So you see how you got to make sure you read it to yourself, and then you get it. So, all right. So I want to take the time. I know we went a little over on that, but the reason I'm doing this, guys, is because I'm trying to help you to get your heads focused on these. You only had 2 exams in this class, okay? So I invite you to make sure that you do the same thing. Just quickly, I'm not going to go over it, but I'm going to show you that. And last week, because it kind of went pretty fast, because I was doing an open house. See, I had the key terms, the practice classification, and then the quiz. So what I'm trying to say to you is each week, I'm trying to get you to hear me, and this is what I want you to hear me and understand that each week we're giving you a way for you to evaluate how well you're grasping the material before you take them. So week 1, so you know what would be a good idea? If it was me, I'd do my studying each week, but then when I got ready to do the quiz, I would go ahead and I would do each of these quizzes for week 1, week 2, and in week 3, I believe it's 1, 2, before I take the real deal. I would do those other little things to help me. Do you guys think that, does that make sense? Yeah, I think it'll be very beneficial, and students who take me up on that will find that their grade on the quiz will be higher. So I'm going to say good night to you guys. Thank you guys for a great turnout tonight, and I appreciate each of you taking the time to come out. It's really important to me that you're getting the message about not just what I'm saying, but you get it firsthand. And so I'm going to tell you tonight's key phrase. Anybody have any ideas about what the key phrase might be? Take a guess. See if any of you are going to get it. No. No. That's a good guess, but that's not it. One more guess. Adversity again. Jignor just put quietly. No home fraud invasion. All right. Property crimes. You were right, but I want property crimes. You get your points, because that's the overall topic. Every week it's not going to be like that. So don't come next week saying, oh, I know what it's going to be next week. You do not know. Okay. So I'm going to say good night to you guys. Again, thanks for being with me tonight. And thank you. I appreciate everything, guys. And again, like I said again, I mean what I say. I'm here to be of support to you and to help you navigate these next 5.5 weeks. So good night. I'm going to say the names of people who are here: Adam, Chris, Donna, Gress, and Jignor. Did I say Jignor? Did I say it correctly? Did I say it right, Jignor? Or is the J? You go by Junior. Don't say it privately. Yeah, I think I remember seeing that. I remember seeing that. Okay. All right. So when I grade your papers, I'll say, okay, Junior. Okay, so we'll know who it is. But in your grade book, it won't say Junior. It'll have your actual name. All right. So you guys have a good week, and I'll see you next week with another edition of Introduction to Criminal Law. Good night.